we're just going to chat through a little bit about probably one of the most common stroke flaws, and one of the probably the biggest things people find that limits them with their swimming, and usually the frustrating part of swimming comes from this exact stroke flaw, where we start to see issues when we think about breathing, because obviously swimming is different, that we have to time our breathing at certain times. We can't just breathe in and breathe out like we can when we run and we cycle. It's always a bigger flaw in most cases for guys. Guys tend to struggle with this, and this usually comes from where trying to fight the water, trying to use just pure strength and overall fitness to kind of swim faster. And usually people aren't limited in their swim technique by strength per se, but more limited by their wasting energy and doing things inefficiently. So we're just going to show you some examples of kind of what we see with some swimmers and kind of how that looks, and probably something that you're doing yourself if you find breathing's an issue. So this particular video here, we can see straight away just how high that head comes out of the water. So what's causing that is the fact that they need to get their head higher out of the water to take a breath in, so it becomes more like a gasp where they have to lift that head really high. And basically what you're doing there is you're trying to extend the time that you've got to breathe. So by lifting your head high out of the water, it gives you more time to take that breath in. But that causes a lot more issues, and it actually gets quite tiring, because what it tends to be, it's more of like a gasp for breath rather than just an inhale, so it becomes more of a rather than just a normal breath in that we would do kind of as we run and as we cycle. And this causes pretty much every other stroke flaw that you can get will always come as a result of this, if this is kind of the main stroke flaw. And this is the big kind of key thing that you want to fix, is reducing that head lifting when you breathe. And what we'll see is what causes this. Now, there's a load of other things going on with this particular swimmer here, but the fundamental one is the breathing. So what you can see there is, as they take the next breath here, what we're looking for in this position is, bar the fact, obviously body position is a big issue here, and we're going to come on to that in a minute, but there's no bubbles coming out from their mouth here. What we want to see at this position here is the swimmer exhaling, just breathing out into the water, just not like a forcing the air out, just releasing air, just exhaling. Because what happens is here, if you're not exhaling in this point here, you're going to have to do it on your breathing stroke. And this is what the issue is for most people, is that they hold their breath. It's basically, they swim 2 or 3 strokes, and then they have to breathe again, and it's then a so they're breathing out and breathing in that kind of when they turn their head out the water, which in this particular case that we've seen a minute ago is how high they have to lift their head. And we'll see it just happen here. Watch what happens just as this swimmer goes to breathe. So they're using this hand now. This right hand that we see here is now being used to kind of leverage their head out of the water, and it's causing their legs to sink more than they already are. All that's come from right now. We want to start seeing that exhalation happen. If we can get the swimmer to start exhaling and relaxing, breathing out into the water, when they need to take a breath in again, they just have to turn their head enough to breathe in. They don't have to breathe out and breathe in the same time. And it'll actually help them get that body position. And the first thing it'll do is it'll help them stay more relaxed. And if they're more relaxed, they can start to focus on what they're doing technically. Where a lot of people go wrong with this is they're not breathing right, so then they can't relax, and then they're just trying to kind of fight and get through the water with brute force and overall fitness. And as I say, because this swimmer lifts their head so high, you get the kind of repercussion of that is their legs sink. So it ends up meaning to then go forward in the water that you're actually going to need even more propulsion to overcome the drag. Now, once you can get breathing sorted, obviously drag reduction is kind of a key component. They are linked in a lot of cases. Usually people's legs sink because they're lifting their head, or their head's too high at the front stroke, or like we've seen in this swimmer, and I've got a few examples here just to show that. So here's another swimmer, slightly different, but the same flaw. Probably a better swimmer, slightly kind of, doesn't need to lift their head quite so high, because their hips, you can see there, their hip position is actually quite good, but they're now off balance. And like we've seen in a video that we did previously, just like what happens when you go off balance, they're using this left hand here to press down, they're lifting their head out of the water, and you can see there's like a gasp for breath, like how much their mouth's open. It's like a real there. Again, no exhalation, no bubbles. We want to see lots of exhalation, breathing out under the water in this position here. I mean, this swimmer's not a bad swimmer by any means. There's some good components of their technique, but it's always going to be limited by the fact that they don't breathe to get the breathing right. So they can probably swim quite fast, and they can do 2, 3, maybe they can swim a couple hundred meters without too much issue, but that's going to leave them quite exhausted at some point. They're going to get really tired, and they're just wasting a lot of energy in this case because their breathing's not controlled. And try this next time you go out for a run. Try holding onto your breath and only breathing out and breathing in kind of when you're forced to, so it becomes like a a bit like when you get to the end of a run, is like if you start to kind of hyperventilate and start to kind of work really hard, you can't do it for very long. So if your technique's great and your breathing's not good, you're always going to be limited by that. So we always want to keep thinking about keeping the breathing nice and relaxed. As I say, the swimmer gets away with it more than the previous example, just purely because their body vision is slightly better, but there's a lot of effort to swimming at this pace just now. It's not efficient. It's not something that's going to help them swim long distances. And if you do triathlon, like Ironman, things like that, if you're in the water swimming like this for an hour and a half, that's not going to leave a lot of energy for the bike and the run. Got another example here of another swimmer. Probably more like the first swimmer here, someone who was quite new to swimming at the time. There's some good parts of it again, but look how much that head, so they're turning and almost looking at the roof to breathe here, so they're actually having to turn that head really high, and as a result we'll see when we go into the water here just how much that's impacting their stroke, and you'll see the legs kind of sinking as well here. So there you can see that left hand. Now there's a couple of things there that's not directly linked to breathing, but they're pressing down at the front, and see they're using that left hand again to leverage their head out of the water, and that's causing their legs to sink. Now this is someone I know that came from like a run background, quite a strong runner, quite physically fit, but wasting all that fitness just on trying to keep themselves breathing, keep themselves afloat in the water. So once you start getting this breathing, we can start to think about the kind of body position, but until you get the breathing right, nothing else is really that important. And I've got one more example, and we're going to kind of chat a little bit about how do we actually fix these issues. So we can see straight away on this first clip here that they're doing exactly the same. That head is really high to breathe, and if you go to the swimming pool, you'll always see people swimming like this. It might even be you that's swimming like this. So we want to figure out how do we fix this. And again, you can see the big issue here is just like those legs are so deep in the water. So the amount of propulsion this particular swimmer is going to need just to move forward in the water is massive. So they're going to need a lot of strength, they're going to need a lot of fitness, and it's just going to wear them out very, very quickly. So we want to fix this as well. And you can see there's lots going on with the kick. Now, it's not something we're necessarily going to fix in one go, but this all ties back to the breathing and lifting this head to breathe. There's a bit more exhalation here, so this is a little bit better than some of the other examples, but they're still breathing out here as they turn to breathe, so it's kind of like a release at the last minute. We'll see here that, so they're breathing out, and then watch, you see on the other side here, you'll see breathing out, and then they exhale that last, see if we can see this here, they exhale just at the last minute, just to get rid of that air before they breathe in again. So what happens there, it's a turn to breathe is rather than just a normal breathing stroke, so it becomes more panicked, and as soon as you start to panic in the breathing, you start to lose kind of focus on what you're doing. It just becomes about getting that breath, not about where's my hand going, what's my legs doing, what's my head doing. You can't really think about those things. So after all that, the key thing is how do we actually fix these things? If breathing's our issue, how do we actually improve it? The first thing to learn is how to relax and exhale in the water. So we want to just get comfortable being in the water, and it is really, really critical to learn to relax in the water. If you're fighting the water, it's going to be a kind of hard way to improve your swimming, and it's probably going to take a lot more effort to swim at a given pace. And you'll see people that'll be swimming next to you in the next lane, or even in the same lane as you, and they'll cruise past, and it looks effortless. And it usually isn't. It's usually not that they're not trying, it's just the fact they're more efficient, so they're not wasting as much energy as maybe you are. And you could be fitter than them, you could be stronger than them, but if they're technically more efficient, you're going to see that's going to be your downfall. So the first thing we want to get swimmers to do, if this is a common issue that we see with swimmers, is learn to sink down in the water, just learning to relax. So just want to kind of play this through just to let you see how this looks here. So what we're doing here is just breathing out and just letting ourselves sink. That's why it's called the sink down. We're just exhalation all the way through until we need to take that breath in again, and then we just stop and come back up to the water. Play that again. So there, as soon as we're here, we're looking for the bubbles. So see the bubbles there? We're exhaling all the way through. Always exhaling. Exhale, exhale, exhale. What you'll find with people who struggle with sink downs is that they'll sink down initially, and then they'll stop. and then they'll come back up, and it'll be like a gasp for breath. And usually that just means that actually they're not exhaling all the way, they're kind of breathing out and then stopping and then coming back up again really quickly. So what allows you to sink is by emptying the kind of lungs and getting rid of most of the CO2 that's in the lungs, by just exhaling, learning to relax, and just letting your body sink to the bottom. The better you can do this, the easier it is to stay relaxed. So this is always a good drill to kind of add in at the start of a swim set, or if you find that your breathing is kind of getting a bit erratic again, is just come back and bring sink downs. If you're a bit apprehensive of doing this in the pool, you can even just do it in the sink or in a bowl or basin of water. Just put some nice warm water in a basin and just practice putting your face in and breathing out, just that exhale. And it will feel unnatural. It's not a natural thing to have to do, especially when you've got that resistance of the water. But just learning to relax, learning to exhale is going to help you stay more relaxed, stay controlled in the water. And I would always get people to start by doing maybe a couple of sink downs and then swim a length nice and easy. With fins, if you've got them, if you can use fins, just to learn that kind of exhalation as you go. And there's a drill that we often kind of prescribe to swimmers, is called Torpedo. Again, fins definitely is advantageous if you're allowed to swim with fins in your pool. If not, it's a wee bit harder, but you can still do it. And the only goal of this is just about getting you nice and streamlined in the water, and also learning to put that relaxation of exhalation into the water as you're actually doing the drill. So you basically just want to think about stretching out as long as you can, like a torpedo, being really long through the abdomen, thinking about stretching your chest and your stomach so you're nice and long there. Hands just straight out in front of you, and legs just a nice gentle kick. And there is more to the kick than just kind of kicking, but you want to think about trying to kick from the hips without too much knee bend. Like we've seen one of the other swimmers in the other video that they were kicking loads from the knee. We want to be kicking mostly from the hips, and it's just that flexibility of the ankle that allows that movement. And we're not looking to go fast with this drill. It's purely about exhalation, purely about body position. So it's not about, trying to go really fast, not try to, basically be a rocket as you swim. It's just being nice and relaxed. When you need to breathe, we can just do either a breaststroke or just a scull as we've got here, just a couple of skull strokes, take a breath, back in the water. As soon as we're back in the water, we're looking for bubbles, we're starting to exhale. And this is a really good way to progress from breathing into developing good body position. Because actually, if you can get those two together, if you can stay relaxed and you can get better body position, you will noticeably swim better. You'll be having less drag, you'll be more relaxed, and you can even keep that swim going. And it's then about how do we then integrate that into the other technique stuff. But until those two are somewhat good, the rest of it's going to just kind of only be good for a very limited period. So we want to get those two right first, and it's always the first place to start if you're new to swimming or you're really struggling with swimming. Is learn to relax, learn to breathe out, and then getting that body position improved. We're going to do some more videos on body position, so stay tuned for them. If you've got any questions about that, or anything doesn't make sense, just feel free to give us a shout, and we'll happily can help you kind of hopefully improve your swimming. Okay, speak to you soon.